It was November of 2014. I'm on a flight from London, England to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Kenya Airways. I'm flying and I noticed this one person seated there who I recognized. Some of my colleagues in Dar es Salaam had told me about him, that they had attended some of his workshops in Dar es Salaam. He was a practitioner of MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type inventory, which is a type of personality profile testing. And so I was tempted to go and speak to him. And I said, I'll wait until I'm in transit in Nairobi. And sure enough, when we're in transit, I'm standing over there. I see him seated alone. And I thought, let me walk over and introduce myself. And so I'm walking over to him. And just as I'm walking that way, I have this aroma of coffee coming from the distance. And I walk away from him to the coffee shop. The reality is, I didn't need a coffee. And so I turned around. I said, I'm going to try this again. And I start walking towards him. And, well, I figured I should probably use the bathroom before I get on to the next flight. And before I know it, I'm standing in the bathroom looking in the mirror. I said, let me try this one more time. I go once more, and sure enough, we connect. I shake hands, I introduce myself. He tells me he's coming to Dar es Salaam to run a workshop, an MBTI workshop. And he said, since you've heard about it, why don't you come? I didn't want to impose. I said, no, thank you. Thank you very much. He said, no, it's free. You'll be my guest. Come. Now, part of me said, what could he possibly teach me about myself that I don't already know? But the reality was, I think I was afraid of actually learning something that might shake my worldview. In any case, he obviously knew that I needed it, and so he insisted once again. He said, look, private one-on-one, you tell me what time. The offer was too good. So I agreed. We met one evening, one-on-one, and we went through these exercises, and he presented me with this 4-letter word. Now, all of these letters have different meanings, but what hit me in the moment was the letter I, because I stood for introvert, and it just so happened it was the opposite of what I thought I was. How many of you have an inkling of where you stand on this extroverted, introverted spectrum? A few introverts here? You won't raise your hands. Some extroverts, some ambiverts who sort of straddle between the two. It's a spectrum. I was really upset. I was upset in the moment because I said, this is shattering my worldview. I said, you have no idea who I am. This test of yours is completely overrated. I knew it. I shouldn't have come for this in the first place. I said, I'm on stages all the time. How does that possibly make me an introvert? So he looked at me and he said, when you're preparing to get on stage, all your research, do you do it like as a team? Do you have people helping you? I'm like, no, I do it myself, solo. I said, and before you get onto stage, what are you usually doing? I said, well, I'm usually outside or in the back, sort of, just on my own. And he said, when you get off of stage, what do you usually do? Are you networking the room? I'm like, no way, I'm out of the door, out. And so he smiled. I kind of answered my own question. What I learned in that moment, because I had always thought that being on the introverted side of the spectrum was a drawback in life, that it would make my voice less important at the table. But in reality, I learned something very different. And so today, let's take a look at 3 misconceptions about the introverted mind and see if we can put that to rest. Now here we are in the 21st century, and we're told, you've got to be fast, you've got to be agile, you've got to be nimble, and that slow decision-making is probably bad. Now here we have Albert Einstein, the theory of relativity, so much more. And when he was asked how he came up with all of these theories, groundbreaking, revolutionary, he replied, it's not that I'm smarter than anybody else. I simply take longer on problems. I take longer to solve problems. Slow, analytical decision-making. Now, fair enough, you say, that's Einstein. What about the rest of us? Well, let's take a look at the rest of us. In 2020, COVID hit the world. Now, I work in the tourism industry, and the tourism industry was heavily, heavily impacted by COVID because we went from an absolute high to complete life support. The industry was decimated. And so what people did in the moment was offboard their teams, fire people, downsize, get rid of everything that you didn't need in the moment. But us at our company here in Tanzania, we actually sat down and tried to do a bit of analysis. And we were convinced tourism would return. The only thing is we just didn't know when. And so what we did is we tried to sit down with our teams, reach mutual agreements, and see if we could support one another until the issue was over. Well, sure enough, by 2022, travel was back, and travel was back with a vengeance. And what happened in airports like Schiphol, London Heathrow, etc., those were the kinds of scenes that you saw because they simply were unable to scale up in time. But yet, in our corner of Tanzania, we were ready to hit the ground running. A little bit of slow decision-making. There's definitely something to be said for fast decision-making in business and in life, but an appreciation for slightly slower decision-making, a bit more analytical, can help greatly with decision-making. Check out that lion sitting at the top of the rock. Did you know that when a male lion roars, its roar can be heard 8 kilometers away? That's pretty loud, wouldn't you say? Pretty loud. But the question is, do you have to be loud to have impact? Well, society tells us that people who don't speak very forcefully probably don't have much to say. Yet here, how many of you recognize this man here? His name is Mohammed Amin. He was a Kenyan photojournalist. In 1984, he went to Ethiopia to cover a famine that the world either didn't know about or didn't care about. Through his photography, black and white, silent photography, he sent out to the world press photographs of this famine, which was ravaging through the country, children starving, mothers unable to feed their children. And by January of 1985, the largest names in the music industry in North America, people like Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, Lionel Richie, and others got together and sung the very first version of We Are the World, raising millions of dollars in famine relief. He didn't do that by filling packed auditoriums and delivering rousing lectures. He simply sent silent, still photography, created silent awareness, and yet created ripples in the world. Now, does that mean he was antisocial, less social? Far from it. He was photographing award winners, prize winners, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, not Nelson Mandela, Nyerere, Julius Nyerere, Malcolm X, and others. And yet we are told that people who are silent tend to be less social. Now, Susan Cain is the modern day, I would say, foremost author on introversion. And she has a book called Quiet. In it, she says, Western modern civilization often doesn't pay enough attention to introverts because they are perceived to be less social and therefore their voices carry less weight. But what she argues is that it's not that introverts are less social, not that they're antisocial, but they are differently social. Or another way of looking at it is selectively social. You will find that people who are on the introverted side of the spectrum are often those who are not talking over you, will rarely be interrupting you when you're speaking, and are looking for slightly deeper conversations. They probably don't want to talk about the weather. They're interested in talking about your favorite author, your favorite book. And so think about it. The last time somebody came to you asking for a listening ear, were you trying to multitask, all your gadgets open, typing emails, answering on the app, posting on social media while also trying to listen to them? Or were you able to put it all away and give them an empathetic listening ear? My journey of self-discovery started on a Kenya Airways flight well into my adult life. But the first time I actually experienced standing outside of that introverted shell was in a school play in grade 4, age 8. I was just a passenger on the flight, and then the lead character got chickenpox, and the teacher needed somebody to learn the lines really quickly. And somehow, she thought this introvert over here was going to be really diligent. And sure enough, before I knew it, I was the lead in the play. And I found that standing on that stage actually gave me a bit of a rush. Because even though it was in front of so many people, the performance was solo. It was individual. And so I really feel like I have come full circle. I started off on that fictitious aeroplane and ended up with a greater introspection on a real aeroplane. But both of those were just by chance. It was a stroke of fate. It was just by chance. But you don't have to wait for chance to start that journey of introspection for yourself and the people around you. If you scan this QR code over here, it will take you to a website. It will take you around 15 minutes to fill, but it will give you a holistic picture of what your strengths are, of what your blind spots are, of what energizes you and what drains your energy. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could know that with intentionality rather than just leaving it to chance? For those of you who find yourself leaning more towards the extroverted side of the spectrum, you have amazing skills to give the world. You have leadership skills, you have charisma, you're great at networking, you're amazing team players. But remember, there are others around you who bring different skills. They may be slower decision makers, they may not be as social, and they may be more quiet than you are, but they bring deep and analytical perspectives, which you can also benefit from. Harness that. Incorporate that. Don't shun it away. And for those of you who find yourself leaning more towards the introverted side of the spectrum, I hope you will go away today knowing that you are a truly valuable member of society. Your voice matters tremendously at the table. Your views are crucial to be heard. And your aspirations for life are just as important as anybody else. Thank you very much.